bitter criticism reading what's happening in the Donbass. If Russia today is saying something from a long time ago, there's nothing related to bombs news, to HIMARS, Oshernik, but I'm going to try to. Oh, there's a news about a ceasefire. No, not ceasefire. No, I've been reading a lot of news from a long time ago, and anyway, and now I realized Russian people, they are the only one in the world that they have attitude in the correct field. So you may say Brazilians are great in soccer, but soccer may be boring. Soccer in general, basketball can be boring. Not the war, not the battlefield. This is a news that says April 29, home, Russia and former Soviet Union. Lavrov claims Kiev wants ceasefire to halt battlefield losses. I guess it's not going to say nothing about Oshernik, not anything about Atacams, HIMARS, nothing. So here we go. Ukraine has demanded an immediate and unconditional truce in reply to Moscow's offer of a 3-day armistice. There's a photograph of a Ukrainian soldier in Pokrovsk. Kiev is demanding an unconditional ceasefire because its forces are being routed on the battlefield, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has said. Earlier this week, Russian President Vladimir Putin offered Kiev a 72-hour truce from May 8 to 10 to coincide with this year's Victory Day anniversary. Ukraine's Vladimir Zelensky criticized the offer as an attempt at quote-unquote manipulation and called for an immediate and unconditional full ceasefire instead. Speaking at the press conference on following a BRICS foreign ministers meeting in Brazil on Tuesday, Lavrov noted a sharp departure in Kiev's intransigence, quote, against the backdrop of what is happening on the ground, on the line of combat contact, where the Ukrainian regime is increasingly retreating again and again, end quote, he said. Quote, they reserved their position 180 degrees and began to demand an immediate truce without preconditions, end quote. The top diplomat added, whereas a month or two ago, quote, Kiev shouted dire warnings that they should not accept any truce, end quote, Lavrov said. European, quote-unquote, radicals were inciting Ukraine to continue the conflict, pumping it full of weapons and insisting that talks could only begin when Ukrainian authorities could negotiate from a position of power. Quote, when Russia is weakened, end quote, the top diplomat said. Western Europe seems to be interested in continuing the conflict in Ukraine, as well as undermining any U.S. peace efforts to end it, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said last week. Moscow has repeatedly criticized European arms supplies to Kiev and condemned its plans to deploy troops in Ukraine as escalatory. Russia has insisted that it has always been ready for peace talks, provided they are aimed at a permanent solution that addresses the core causes of the conflict. Any temporary ceasefire will instead be used by Kiev's western backers as a chance to rearm Ukraine. Moscow Moscow has said. And there's two related news. The first is from 1 day ago. Putin orders 3-day May ceasefire in Ukraine conflict. The proposed truce will last 72 hours, including May 9, the day Russia celebrates the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany. I hope Ukraine doesn't do nothing stupid like a terrorist attack. Russian President Vladimir Putin. And on the photograph, Russian President Vladimir Putin has ordered a 72-hour ceasefire in the Ukraine conflict to coincide with the 80th anniversary of the Soviet Union's victory over Nazi Germany. Moscow has emphasized that it is willing to pursue peace talks without preconditions, while cautioning that any ceasefire violations will be met with a response, according to the Kremlin statement. Putin said the ceasefire has been proposed due to quote-unquote humanitarian considerations and ordered the suspension of all military activity against Ukrainian forces starting from midnight on March 7 to 8 and lasting until midnight on May 10 to 11. Here is the Kremlin statement in full. It's not too big. By order of the Supreme Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, the Russian side, guided by humanitarian motives, announces a ceasefire for the celebrations of the 80th anniversary of the victory in the Great Patriotic War to last from May 8 Moscow time to May 11 Moscow time. Any military operations will be ceased during this period. Russia believes that the Ukrainian side should follow this example. In the event of any violations of the ceasefire by the Ukrainian side, the armed forces of the Ukrainian Federation will give a proportionate and efficient response. The Russian side reiterates its willingness to enter peace talks without preconditions, with a view of eliminating the root causes behind the Ukraine crisis and establishing a constructive interaction with international partners. Yeah, today was a little emotional because I'm facing difficulties to submit my inscription on English test, on Duolingo speaking test, and it's so hard, you know. All these companies, Duolingo, Yelp, TOEFL, they are all terrible. And what can I say? It's very frustrating. Maybe I will end up starving right here in Chile with no chance to do any English test. I just want to do it's not necessary it's not necessary to. It doesn't have to be an English test. It can be a Spanish test in this case for me to go to Brazil. It can be a Spanish test. But this being terribly dramatic, these companies, these language test companies, are just too obscure. And well, I have my email. My original email is Alexander Burletova. Paying tribute to Alla Burletova, the Instagram model. There's an Instagram model called Alla Burletova. And I'm a strongly supporter of Russia's, not because I think all Russians are great, but they did something very special for the mankind history, which is stopping the imperialism. You know, because for the imperialism, for the US, for US imperialism, the only way to go, the only way to survive, it will be assault the Russian Federation, to steal all the natural resources, to install another president like Boris Yeltsin. It will be terrible. But didn't happen. It didn't happen. Putin was victorious, and that's why I will love to be Russian, not Chilean.